Now, Sports Talk with Broads. Here's Hunter Brody.
What is going on, everyone? Let's talk more Eagles football, and I think today's conversation is very fascinating. We will dive into Carson Wentz, Doug Peterson, and Jim Schwartz. I want to look at, well, how long their leashes really are. How much time do they have here in Philly until the seat gets so hot from each of their individual positions? Jim Schwartz is my favorite because he's one of those people that won't get the respect that he deserves until he is gone. Once Jim Schwartz is not in town anymore, that's when the fan base will realize, damn, he really knew what he was doing from a defensive coordinator standpoint. We'll get to Jim Schwartz. He will be the third person we talk about. I want to start with Carson Wentz because there was an article on ESPN.com, and it ranked the NFL quarterbacks' commitments in 2020. Essentially, how married are all 32 teams to their quarterback? And Carson Wentz was fourth on the list. Now, instantly, what that shows me and how my brain works, it pretty much says, all right, the way the contracts are structured in this league for that position just might not be that crazy. A lot of superstar quarterbacks, they're not on these big-time, insane deals. And if they are, they're towards the back end of their careers. Tom Brady, the GOAT. Look at his contract with Tampa Bay. It's not long. They're not that tied to each other, right? Aaron Rodgers, where's he at in his career? Phillip Rivers, Big Ben. These big-time quarterbacks that are the top of the top. Drew Brees. Let's look at their contracts. So instantly, my mind goes there. Well, that's not saying that the Eagles are in some horrendous spot where they can't get out of Carson Wentz or they're stuck with him forever and all this nonsense. It just shows where other quarterbacks really are. I will say, though, while I say that, I'm looking at number 2, number 3 on the list. I'm not a huge fan of where those respected franchises are. If I was in their scenario, I would look at it differently. And I think that's because I value Carson Wentz way more than those quarterbacks. Now, before we get into the list, let's hear a word from my sponsor from Orbit Energy and Power. This episode of Sports Talk with Broads is sponsored by Orbit Energy and Power, and they set the standard for clean energy. Whether you are looking to add solar to your home or company, Orbit works directly with you to ensure that you are getting the best deal. That's not all. They also provide water purification systems, backup energy services, battery storage, and more. So visit them online at orbitenergy.us or give them a call at 800-836-3987. Number 1 on the list is Jared Goff. And his contract right now, 4 years, $134 million extension, which was signed in September of 2019, and $57 million guaranteed. Now, I'm not a Jared Goff hater, really. I am not. I think that if you surround him with good talent, he will be able to succeed. And I don't love the way that the media perceives Sean McVay as if he is this super genius that knows everything and he remembers every play that he ever called in every situation ever. I mean, I can't stand the brutal love and obnoxious support for Sean McVay. I think it's so overblown, but he's not a horrendous coach either. I think because the way the media drills him, to me, makes me look at him in a negative way, but I understand. He is a smart coach. He does have a good vibe around him. Players do enjoy playing for him, so I'm not going to sit here and say he's some horrendous coach. I think Sean McVay and Jared Goff can work together, and you saw them go to the Super Bowl. It was a dud of a Super Bowl game once they got there, but they can get there if they are surrounded properly. Here's the thing, though. When you look at teams that succeed with young quarterbacks at times, and the Eagles being one of them, it comes down to not having to pay their quarterbacks big-time money. These quarterbacks are still on their rookie deals at the time. Also factor in Seattle Seahawks with Russell Wilson the first time around. He was on that rookie deal. It's so much easier to build that team around somebody when the quarterback is not making a big-time amount of money. So now that Jared Goff is making that much, Is it going to be way harder to surround him with the right pieces? Absolutely. But I'm not a Jared Goff hater. Does he have bad games? Yeah, absolutely. Does he have good games? Yeah, he does. And I think he is a quarterback that can win in this league. It's just going to be a little bit harder. And I knock more of their other decisions more so than I do signing Jared Goff. You draft Jared Goff first overall. You are going to utilize him for years to come. I mean, that's what you do when you draft a quarterback that high that shows you that he can play. I mean, he showed you that he can play. You sign him for a long-term deal, and you hope that it works out. So with Jared Goff, yeah, I mean, okay, they're tied to him. I don't think the Rams are in the worst situation in the world because of that deal, but I think because of other moves they made, and not working the cap properly with other moves, that makes it look a lot worse. Once again, I'm not claiming that this is the best deal in the world, but being tied to Jared Goff, I don't think that is the worst thing ever. The problem is, though, they haven't utilized their cap very well in other places. And then you make the trade for Jalen Ramsey. Now you got to pay Jalen Ramsey. Now you got to throw other guys to the curb. You got to get rid of certain players. Brandon Cooks was one of them. I mean, they didn't properly assess their cap. But moral of the story, when it comes to Jared Goff and being tied to him for years to come, I do not see that being a negative thing. Now let's move on to number 2, which is Ryan Tannehill. I don't like the deal whatsoever. They got to the AFC Championship game. They ran the ball. They destroyed teams with Derrick Henry. You're going to have to go out and make sure that there's always a running back with Ryan Tannehill. But running backs just fall apart. I mean, if you want to continue with Derrick Henry, you can't be giving him the same amount of touches. That is not a recipe for success. And you can plug and play with running backs. That's a big thing that I always talk about. But if you're going to go with that Derrick Henry motor, I don't know if anyone can just do what Derrick Henry did last year. And if you want to rely on him specifically, you can't continue to do that year after year after year after year with that guy. With that specific role, that is one that is hard to fill every single season. So that one is going to be a little bit tough. You don't find those type of undrafted players every single year that can change it to that degree. When I talk about these undrafted running backs who can fill a role, if you have a Miles Sanders, okay, you can find that second guy, that third guy. But with Ryan Tannehill and Vrabel's scheme that they ran last year, it's going to be tough. And I just don't see that being a long-term thing. And to have Ryan Tannehill on a 4-year, $118 million contract, including $62 million guaranteed, he is the definition of 500. And let me be clear. I think that you can win with an average quarterback if you have the proper pieces. I've seen it before. Nick Foles is a perfect example. He is an average quarterback, and he had the right pieces around him. Ryan Tannehill is the definition of just straight up 500 football. Go look at his record. He is 500 football, but he went to the AFC Championship last year. So it is very possible, right? You can do it. It's harder, way harder, but it is something that can be done. I just don't think I would want to be tied to Ryan Tannehill for 4 years for that much money. I would personally like to go in a different direction. Number 3 is Kirk Cousins. He got a 2-year, $66 million extension this past March. To me, he's a better version of Sam Bradford, but when I bring up Sam Bradford, it's the money stuff. We always talk about Sam Bradford. He's stealing money all the time. It's like almost the same thing. Now, Kirk Cousins is the dude that just gets bashed all the time. He can do no right. I don't think he's as bad as what people say he is. I don't think he's great either. Would I want to be tied to Kirk Cousins for that long? No, I wouldn't. But I don't think that you're doomed. You can win with Kirk Cousins. I just told you that Ryan Tannehill got to an AFC Championship game. He was surrounded the right way, but Ryan Tannehill. If Ryan Tannehill can do that, Kirk Cousins could do it. Because Kirk Cousins is a better quarterback than Ryan Tannehill. And you had Diggs, and he had this attitude problem, I guess I'd say, where they didn't really get along, and he was pissed off, and he pulled the diva card, the wide receiver diva card. Maybe that had something to do with it. Turmoil in the locker room between your quarterback and your wide receiver. Stop me if you heard that before. Carson Wentz and Alshon Jeffrey. We saw the type of noise that it generates We saw the hostility that was involved. That plays a factor. Maybe that's something that had to be addressed, and now that it is, that kind of opens the door for Kirk Cousins to be able to, I don't know, have a little different voice in the locker room now that there's someone in, or there's not someone in there who's obviously disappointed in the quarterback's play. And number 4 was Carson Wentz. The reason why I'm okay with this is you can see that Carson Wentz has the talent. Is the problem staying on the field? Yes. Is that a major problem? Yes. But I don't think that anyone really destroys his skill level. Can he play at this league? Yeah, no doubt. There are times where he misses wide open throws. There are times where he misses people in the flat or his long ball isn't perfect. But there is something to be said about, he does have the skill level when he's at the top of his game to be something scary in this league. That is big. That is huge. And last year, even though it was 9-7 and he had some brutal parts of the season, he came through, he won with some practice squad players, and he was able to be a big-time factor and put the team on the back, even though they were playing garbage teams. I'm a huge Carson Wentz supporter. I'm not to the extreme, though, that he can do no wrong. I will get on him, and I will get on him harshly. But overall, to say, listen, you have Carson Wentz through 2023, 2024. Okay. All right. Carson Wentz is here through 2024. Is it possible that there's that one option where the Eagles can totally find a way to do something? Will there be a dead cap hit? Yeah. So there will be some sort of dead cap hit if the Eagles don't pick up the option and yada, yada, yada. I don't see that happening, though. The leash for Carson Wentz is this window, is this contract. I see it being this contract, 2020 through 2024. And what I see happening is Carson Wentz having to prove to this organization that he's the dude for the next contract. What's going to be a really hard, brutal decision is if he continues to show when he's healthy, he's a dog. He's the guy. When he's healthy, when he's out there, he's awesome, flat out unreal. But there might be some seasons where he struggles to stay healthy. And then that new contract's going to come up. And what do? Do you let this talented freak of nature leave because, well, there's times where he can't stay healthy? Or do you sign him and then you got to find a way to make sure that you have a reliable player behind him just in case something bad happens? That's where it's going to get sticky and nicky and scary. That's going to be a really tough, brutal decision. Kind of like, to a different degree, but a very similar mindset, Malcolm Jenkins. That was a tough, hard decision. You knew Malcolm Jenkins had some left in the tank. He was a shell of himself from what he used to be in his prime, and that makes sense. And the age would be totally different from the quarterback position as well. When you play safety and you're Malcolm Jenkins' age compared to where Carson Wentz would be after this contract at around 30, it's two totally different scenarios due to the physicality of the body, because at safety, you're laying the hard hits. Quarterback, a little bit different. Plus, you see a lot of quarterbacks in today's era of football play into the late 30s, play into the 40s. Now, with the history of Carson Wentz, do I think that that's going to happen 40? Probably not. But if you're telling me that Carson Wentz can play into 37 or something like that, that's still a good chunk of his career if you were to have to sign him after this upcoming contract is over. But similar to the Jared Goff conversation when it comes to how meaningful it is when you have to pay your quarterback big money, the Eagles have to do that now. And now it's going to play a big-time difference in how they can add players to their roster, who they can pay, what type of free agents they can go out and grab. And that's why when the Jalen Ramsey news was circulating, go get him, go pay him. And same with the Ngakoue stuff. I was a big fan of going out and getting Ngakoue. Not Jalen Ramsey, because I didn't want to give up 2 first-round picks. But would I go out and get Ngakoue? Yes, I would. But then, after I realized the part about, okay, it's not just about the talent, let's see what it would cost, and you're seeing the numbers and how much he wants to get paid, it just wouldn't really work with having to fill other voids. I want him, I do, and could Howie figure it out? Sure, he is a cap wizard, but it just wouldn't work. It just didn't make sense. If you're going to get Ngakoue, which would totally help this football team, then, well, you'd be complaining about the other holes that you can't fill because you had to pay Ngakoue. Trust me, I wanted Ngakoue at the time. You can go back to me saying, dude, I would do it. First round pick, I'd think about it. But the more and more you have to dive into it, how much money that first round pick is and their contract compared to the big time contract that Ngakoue would get, it's just something that probably wouldn't be realistic for where this team is now that Carson Wentz is getting paid the big time money. So just to keep going just a little bit briefly through the list, Joe Burrow is number 5, and that makes sense. I don't think that there's no contract yet, but that's kind of speculating that the Bengals are going to put it to paper, of course. Seattle, Russell Wilson is number 6, 4-year, $140 million extension signed in April of 2019. I would not be mad about that at all if my franchise was signed with Russell Wilson for many years to come. Tua's number 7, Justin Herbert number 8. So you can see that these picks that just got picked this year is top 10, which makes sense. Matt Ryan 9, Aaron Rodgers 10. So kind of what we were saying here when it comes to some of these players. It's about their age, really, and how many years are left. Tom Brady's number 12. He has a 2-year deal. Number 12 is a 2-year deal. From there, it kind of just depends on the money and the 2 or 1 year deal that is left. So, it tells me more about where the other players are on their current contracts, more so than the Eagles are just totally insanely in this horrible position and so tied up with Carson Wentz they don't know what to do with themselves. All these quarterbacks that I just named from this year's draft, Tua and Joe Burrow, once they're off their rookie deal, they're going to be in the same position as where the Eagles are, where the Rams are. I mean, it's just one big cycle. It's just about the current spot that these teams are right now, more so than they're doomed. They're doomed. Let's move to the head coach, Doug Peterson. For a while now, I've been on Doug Peterson's case, saying I love what he brings to the table from a leadership standpoint. There's something to be said about December Doug Peterson, right? I mean, he rallies the troops. But at the same time, it's frustrating because it's a common theme. Start out slow, things get a little ugly, then he has the team rally back, right? And I just don't know how long that will be allowed for. At some point, that Super Bowl is no longer really, I'm not going to say valid because it's always valid, but there's going to be a time where you can't rely on that Super Bowl and go, well, Doug Peterson, I mean, he's that Super Bowl winner. You're going to have to at some point say, Doug, what are you doing for us now? Super Bowl was great, but let's see what you're doing for us now. So I looked around the league, right? And here I have a bunch of head coaches in this league that had a ton of success, won a Super Bowl, and then they haven't in a little bit of time. And I was just looking at what their records were like year after year after year after that Super Bowl. And I kind of want to relate it to Doug Peterson. So we know that Doug's rookie year, he went 7-9. Tough to really judge a head coach on their rookie season. 13-3 sophomore campaign, won a Super Bowl. Unbelievable. Back-to-back 9-7 seasons. And I would like to start with John Harbaugh. In 2012, the Ravens won the Super Bowl at 10-6, and the defense played amazing. Joe Flacco did his thing. But 4 of the next 5 years resulted in no postseason play. They went 8-8, 10-6, which was the season where they did actually go to the playoffs, 5-11, 8-8, and 9-7. I think this city would go crazy for Doug Peterson's head to get him fired if 4 of the 5 seasons after the Super Bowl was won resulted in no playoffs. Now, here's the thing, and I've mentioned this before. That season in 2017 where they went 9-7, it's weird how it's viewed. If you go 9-7 but make the playoffs like the Eagles did the last 2 years, well, okay, it's already made the playoffs. But if you go 9-7 and don't make the playoffs, which statistically you have a better chance of not making it than making it, the Eagles just got lucky over the last couple seasons, well, then it's totally looked at in a different way. Here's something to add into the mix, though. There will be more teams making the playoffs, and now that changes the discussion, and people are more satisfied for making the playoffs, unless it's a team where listen, technically, okay, they made the playoffs, but they don't have a shot in hell. They don't have a damn chance. Maybe people view it properly, assessing the team and assessing the coach, even if they technically do squeak in, if there's no chance that they are able to provide any sort of spark in the postseason. I mean, I do think that will be something that people need to look at moving forward as the league changes their rules. Anyway, though, going back to John Harbaugh, it's just interesting to put the two into two different categories, Like, where is Doug Peterson going to go moving forward if he continues down this road? Will he have a long enough leash? Will Jeffrey Lurie and this front office, Howie Roseman, keep him here? Now, let's be real. If Doug Peterson was to hit the open market as a head coach, he gets snagged instantly. I mean, there would be a ton of teams who would hop on Dougie P and hire him in an instant, and that tells you what type of coach that you have. And they went through Andy Reid, and they sat through Andy Reid, the good and the bad. So knowing that he actually won the grand prize, maybe they do give him a longer leash. But if you're telling me 8-8, 5-11, no playoffs over and over again, I don't know. I mean, sports fans these days, they don't have a lot of composure, right? And they don't have, I'm not going to say poise, but what's the word I'm looking for? The patience. Patience. They do not have a ton of patience. And it will be a nightmare if Doug P goes through a handful of seasons without postseason play. Another guy I like to bring up is Mike McCarthy. He won a Super Bowl in 2010 with the Green Bay Packers. Here's the difference, though. And this is what I think Doug Peterson would have to do to keep it somewhat civil. After that Super Bowl season, 2011, 15-1, 11-5, 8-7-1, 12-4, 10-6, 10-6. Where things went south, and look, just 2 seasons. 7-9, bad season. 4-7-1, boom, fired that year, week 13. The difference, there was some hostility involved. Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy himself going head-to-head. There was a lot of talk. But look, he put together one hell of a resume after winning that Super Bowl. And that kept it reasonable for a little bit of time. Even though they weren't winning Super Bowls, they were actively winning playoff games. 3 playoff games, 2 playoff games, 2 playoff games, 1 playoff game, 2 playoff games, 1 playoff game. They were going to the playoffs and winning games and being involved and being in the mix. That's what Doug Peterson is going to have to do after that Super Bowl championship. Is he doing that, though? Pete Carroll, let's look at it. 2013, won the Super Bowl. 12-4, 10-6, 10-5-1, 9-7, 10-6, 11-5. Let's go, Dougie P. How about Sean Payton? I've looked up a ton of coaches because this is really intriguing. I'm trying to look at the leash for Super Bowl winning coaches. Sean Payton in 2009 won the Super Bowl. Then he went 11-5, 13-3, 11-5. Here's the kicker. From 2014 through 2016, 7-9, 7-9, 7-9, no playoffs. So what this really tells me, if I'm going to dive a little bit deeper, even if a coach does go on a stretch of not winning playoff seasons or not getting into the playoffs and not having winning seasons, it might not be a great thing to just run him out of town because John Harbaugh did a great job last season. Sean Payton, 7-9, 7-9, 7-9. Well, how about the years after? 11-5, 13-3, 13-3, and then got screwed out of that one NFC championship game for a chance to play in the Super Bowl. So, you know what? If Doug Peterson does have a stretch of 8-8, 7-9, 5-11, maybe it's time to just take a deep breath and look around the league and look at some other coaches where, hey, let's not just pull the trigger too quick. Let's just see what will happen. I'm torn. I am torn Because there are some things with Doug P where I do question a little bit. Now, ultimately, like I said, I do understand that he is a good head coach. I'm not knocking him by any means. I question some of his things, but I do think that he's a good head coach. But there is something to be said about what goes on with him early in the year. Start out slow. Some of the creativity is a little at times. Some things are dry. Some stunad play calls here and there. And no coach is perfect. I'm not saying you're going to find a coach that calls all these plays that are just absolutely fantastic. But I am a little torn, though, because I won't be satisfied with 5-11, 8-8, 7-9, over and over and over again. I will not be satisfied because you know what? For some of these head coaches that did win a Super Bowl and then had a little bit of a stall but then picked it back up throughout their career, there's plenty of coaches as well that they go into a little bit of a stall and then they do not find a way to get out of it, Super Bowl or not. So, I mean, it doesn't just mean because he won a Super Bowl and then goes through a low point, that means he's automatically 100% going to get out of it either. Like, I'm actually torn on how to feel. I mean, I think to some extent, you give him the benefit of the doubt and you allow him to see if he can work out of it. So he has a decent little leash, but it's not going to be insanely long either. I'll say, you know those leashes where the dog can run, and then once he runs too far, it like snaps them back a bit? That's kind of what we need. It's the retractable one, maybe. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. But something like that. That's where Dougie P is at the moment. It's got some decent length to it. But hey, there's going to be a timer. It chokes you if you're not able to execute. What other coaches did I put down on here? Mike Tomlin's one of them because he won the Super Bowl, and then 9-7, 12-4, 12-4, 8-8, 8-8, 11-5, 10-6, 11-5, 13-3, 9-6-1, 8-8. So you're gonna get seasons that aren't perfect. You will get an 8-8. You will get a couple 9-7s. I mean that will happen. It's ridiculous to think that will not happen. But it's gotta eventually start forming into a decent stretch of success. If Doug Peterson is able to go 12-4, 11-5, 11-5, 10-6, and then there's a 7-9 in there, and then the following season after that, he's back to 9-7, 10-6, 11-5. Okay, you can live with that. What I won't live with, though, is consistent 9-7, 8-8. That just shows mediocre. And I want to be better than mediocre. Quarterback play is also a factor in that too, of course. Head coach and quarterback play is one and together. And last, real quick, I'm not going to dive too heavy on Jim Schwartz, but I just find it so funny that he is the one that gets so destroyed. He gets all the hate. And he's not perfect. The sticks can't stand the sticks at times. Not helping out players over the top when you know they can't stand on an island by themselves. Come on, right? I mean, you're putting your players in a bad position at times. But he is a smart football mind. You can argue that he is the smartest football mind in the Eagles organization. He's been around a long time, and he's another dude that could get snagged instantly. I mean, he is a very smart D coordinator. Remember when everyone screamed for him to blitz, 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 blitz? And then he brought the blitz all the time in that Atlanta Falcons game, and it was very successful. And then he brought the blitz late, and they ended up winning on that late play. And then all those people screamed, "Why are you blitzing? Why are you blitzing?" You can't have it both ways. He was never blitzing, so he actually did it. It was working, and then he did it on a play at the end, and he got beat. What do you want him to do? And keep in mind, he plays with people the last couple seasons that stink, that are off the streets, that nobody ever heard of. This year, he's got Darius Slay. All right, he lost Malcolm Jenkins, big loss. He's got Darius Slay. He's got more to work with. He's got a corner who can actually shut down another player. Let's see how they utilize him. Hopefully, and this is big on Jim Schwartz, hopefully he makes sure that he covers their best number one wide receiver. I don't want it to be Avonte Maddox on Julio Jones. Think about that size matchup versus Darius Slay on Calvin Ridley just because of the specific sides they're on. No. And I don't think Jim Schwartz would do that. But Jim, this is going to be a big season for him. No Malcolm. How will he use Jalen Mills? How will he use Roby Coleman, Cravon LeBlanc, some of those linebackers that he has there? Nate Kerry. It's big for Jim Schwartz, but you got to respect what he does because he has been working with barely any talent due to injuries, and he's done a hell of a job. Malik Jackson, big acquisition last year. toast early on. Barely even used. He got thrown a brutal bone over the last few years, and I'd argue they did a great job. Once again, the sticks bother me? Yeah. The sticks bother me. And back in the day, I was screaming for Jim Schwartz's head. But as I started to learn the game more, as I developed a little bit more knowledge about what he was bringing to the table from the X's and O's, and how he utilized certain players and the roles and some of his play calls, and I dove deeper, I really appreciate what Jim Schwartz brings to the table, and I don't want him fired, and I want him to be here because he's smart. He's a strong dude when it comes to that defensive side of the ball, and he's had success in that specific position. As a head coach, yeah, not so much. In that position, yeah. And some guys make way better coordinators than they do head coaches, and Jim Schwartz is that dude. So just appreciate what he brings, because he knows what he's doing. And he's got a unique lineup this year on that side of the ball. Let's see how he's able to do it. But if he was fired, he's at a different part of his career, so, who knows what he would want to do specifically. But if a team wanted a D coordinator and he was available, he would absolutely be in the mix. I mean, if he's at a spot in his career where he only wants to be a head coach, or one of those scenarios are laid out, well, that's different. But if he wanted a job, he would be able to get a job. And that's how you know if you have a good person in your organization or not. Will other people want him? And I would say that, yeah, with these two guys, people would want them. And that says a lot. It tells you a lot. All right, so this episode of Sports Talk with Broads is sponsored by Orbit Energy and Power, and they set the standard for clean energy. Whether you are looking to add solar to your home or company, Orbit Energy and Power works directly with you to ensure that you are getting the best deal. That's not all. Orbit also provides water purification systems, backup energy services, battery storage, and more. Visit them online at orbitenergy.us or give them a call at 800-836-3987. Thank you guys so much for listening. I would love to hear your comments, so make sure you are commenting down below if you're listening on YouTube. If you are listening on any podcasting platform, especially Apple Podcasts, make sure you leave a review as your comment. I love reading them. They're absolutely fantastic. And also leave a rating as well. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.